Welcome back to Insights from the Couch, Mental Health at Midlife. We have a fabulous guest today, Sandy Weiner, who is here with us to talk about dating at midlife and beyond and finding love at this stage of life, which we're all very optimistic about. Sandy Weiner is the Chief Love Officer, I love that, at Last First Date. She's an internationally known TEDx speaker, dating and relationship coach, author, and podcast host. Her approach to coaching is holistic, encompassing a hybrid mix of life coaching, neurolinguistic programming, and nonviolent communication. She's the author of 3 books, which is very impressive. Becoming a Woman of Value, How to Thrive in Life and Love, and Choice Points in Dating, Empowering Women to Make Healthier Decisions in Love, and Love at Last, True Stories of Falling in Love Later in Life. She's also the host of 2 popular podcasts, Last First Date Radio and the Woman of Value podcast. And she believes it's never too late to have the life and love you want. Welcome, Sandy. We are so happy to have you, and I cannot wait to dig into this conversation.
I'm so excited to be here and share all the stuff.
I wondered if first, I listened to your TED Talk. It was so good, and
Thanks.
you shared your story. I wonder if you could share a little bit of that with us. What led you to get into this line of work?
Yeah, and you don't wake up when you're 5 years old thinking, I'm going to be a dating coach one day. I really got into this field because I struggled so much with relationships. And I think many of us get into helping fields, helping professions because of our own story. For me, I watched my parents go through a really bad marriage with terrible communication, and nobody talked about feelings. And I just was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. And right before I met the man who became my husband, I fell madly in love with a man who, it turned out, was not interested in me, but we were friends for a very long time, and I thought it was getting closer and closer to a relationship. We did everything together, and I talk about this in my TED Talk, and I was shocked to find out that he was engaged to somebody else.
Whoa.
So this also speaks to my lack of communication skills. I would just kind of take those little breadcrumbs and hope that they would turn into a loaf of bread. And after that, I shut my heart down. I just said, I'm going to use my head and not my heart to choose a spouse. And I was getting to that age of, closer to 30, where I thought my ovaries were going to completely expire. And I got that time clock ticking, and I chose the first man who proposed to me, who seemed to be madly in love with me. And I thought that would keep my heart safe. And it did not. Shocker.
Spoiler alert.
Right, exactly. Spoiler alert. I just didn't really know what I was doing. And, we had a lot of crisis in our marriage. And it was just the way we handled crisis was completely different from each other. I was just talking to my son about our parenting styles were completely opposed. And it was not a fun marriage. And I stayed for 23 years and finally left. And when I left, I found I need to reclaim parts of me that have been lost along the way. And one of those parts was the ability to connect deeply with people. I was known as that person my whole life. And I studied a little bit of art therapy in college because I was an artist primarily. And I didn't like the program. I felt very interpretive, like we were interpreting for the people. And I am much more of a believer that we provide skills and people interpret for themselves. And that's why coaching spoke to me. So when I found that, it was like great fit. And I didn't dive right into dating and relationship coaching. It was more midlife transition. And I was helping men and women transition into this part of their lives, and whether it was empty nest or finding a new career. And then I kind of stumbled upon dating because friends of mine were dating way before I was after divorce and making a complete mess of their lives. And I was just like, you're completely misreading what men are saying. Like, they're telling you they're not going to have a relationship with you. And you're saying, well, what do you think that means? I don't really And I'm like, that it means what he said. So I was writing profiles for people. Like I just, it came naturally to me and I didn't even know it was a career. And then after doing this for a while, I was like, this is really an important field. We struggle so much with this. I struggled so much with this. And that's really how it became a career for me.
I relate to so much of that, growing up in a house also where I didn't witness healthy communication, and you're not set up for a good foundation for what to look for in a marriage. I came out of that environment thinking if there's no discussion of anything and everyone has a smile on their face, then we're good. And my God, is that the worst perspective? So I
The
really
worst.
appreciate you shared with listeners what you went through in your marriages and this evolution. And what a great job. I imagine you have a lot of fun too doing what you do. Is that true?
I have fun. I kind of think of it as like I'm watching my children grow. You watch somebody come to you with all of these struggles, and then at the end, they are happy with themselves. They are better at relationships. They have skills. They have better relationships with their families, with their coworkers. They're now bolder, more confident. And I think one of the highlights for me recently was coming to Florida to officiate at the wedding of one of my clients. It was the first time I officiated. So I watched her go from, I think I'm asexual because that's what my therapist told me because I'm not attracted to anybody, to I am madly in love with this man, but she never wanted to go on a second date with him. And so I said, I have to officiate this wedding. And it was just amazing. So you talk about full circle coming from that initial meeting where she's crying to me, I'll never find love again. I had a horrible marriage and we were full of conflict. She had no idea how to fight fair, how to do any of the skills that we teach. And now they're in this beautiful, loving relationship. And I got to witness all of it. So yeah, fun and
That's amazing.
yeah,
That's the
amazing.
best part, right? Is you just watch people believe in themselves and then create lives that are worth having. I see a lot of women at midlife who are especially if you haven't dated since you were young, it throws you back to a very vulnerable place. What is the typical client that you work with, or is every story hyper unique, or is there sort of a core client you have?
I attract a lot of anxiously attached people. I attract a lot of people who have been people pleasers.
I don't know anything about that.
I know, really. Overachievers, perfectionists, focused a lot on work and forgot to focus on love or didn't know how to. I've had people who came from really, really damaging beginnings, some people who were never married. It really runs the gamut. And I started coaching men a few years ago, too. So I've had a lot of widowed men and women and people who don't even know how to get started. A lot of people have this misconception that if you're widowed, you don't have a lot of damage. Like you had a perfect marriage, right? And, you're going to be just out there and it's going to be super easy for you. And it's not. It requires skills and it requires self-knowledge and also looking at what happened in your marriage that you don't want to repeat. Even if you had an extraordinary relationship and you really missed your partner, there were always things that we can do differently and better.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me first ask, because we talked about this a little bit, you and I. In your latest book, where you have all these beautiful and interesting stories of how couples find love later in life, what are some of the surprising ways couples have met that you've heard? Because I think this gives people a lot of hope.
One of my favorite stories is, I think it's chapter 5, where this chance encounter in Tuscany happened. And this woman was a client of mine for many years, the loveliest, most beautiful woman. She was just not finding connection with most people that she was meeting in Texas where she lived. And she was holding out for something special. So she did all the work. She had like a file. She once sent it to me of all the things that she compiled about best practices in dating and relationships. So it was really just a matter of the connection. with the right person. And she was unique. She was multilingual. She was a person who was very charitable, loved to travel. And then COVID happened and she couldn't travel. So when the COVID restrictions opened, she went to Italy with her friend. Something happened with their hotel reservation. It got messed up. So they ended up in this beautiful town, and they got invited to a dinner party. And the dinner party, it was just a big table. This woman used to do these dinner parties every month, and she seated her next to this guy who spoke Italian, and she wanted to practice her Italian. She sits next to this guy, and she said it was like a bubble. Like she was in this flow of conversation. They couldn't stop talking. It was like nobody else was there, when you meet somebody and, oh my God.
You click.
And yeah, they really clicked. And she was going back to Texas. He's a travel guide, and he was going to be traveling all over. So he said, can we keep in touch and practice? I'll practice my English. You'll practice your Italian over Skype. So they're doing that, and she's getting to know him. And it turns out he keeps mentioning a partner. And she's like, I don't know if this is a business partner or a partner. So I said, just ask him. She asked him. It turns out he's living with this woman. So she says, am I crazy to keep talking to him? I'm really attracted to him. I feel such a strong, soul connection to this guy. And I said, if you're okay with it and you can let go of attachment to the outcome, just do it. Who cares? Whatever happens will be a good thing. And so they continued this way for a number of months. And then he invited her back to Italy, and she broke her foot. She gets to Italy, trips and falls, ends up in the emergency room with a giant boot, and they're about to meet. And I think they booked separate rooms, and he went out that night to the terrace, and it was pouring rain. And in the middle of the night, he's out there, and he's in this meditative state, and he comes back and he goes to her and he says, I had this epiphany last night that I need to break up with my partner and be with you. Of course, it's not simple, right? Breakups are not simple. If you're living with a partner, it's not simple. So I want people to know, it's magical and it's beautiful. It's her dream come true that she never would have met him had she not had this accidental meeting. But it took a while to iron out all the stuff. This woman was really upset that he was leaving her, and he had to, just to break up that whole relationship took a lot of energy, mentally, physically, all of it. But she is so happy. And that, to me, that was one of my favorites.
It's like Under the Tuscan Sun, but real life.
Exactly.
It can be anywhere, right? Finding
Anywhere.
a person can be anywhere. You have to remain open to it.
And put yourself out there. And like I always say, talk to strangers, be friendly, be open. I met my husband in a similar way, in a restaurant where I made an offhand comment that offended him. And it turned into a whole thing. And now 12 years later, here we are. You just don't know.
Yeah.
And it's so encouraging to hear other stories, because I know a lot of people, both from being a therapist, friends, and I had 11 years of being single between my marriages where I was out there dating. So I've done a lot of this. I'm curious, Sandy, do you date? Where are you in your own trajectory with all of this?
Yeah, so when I first became a dating coach, I thought the most important thing was that I should find my happy ending. And I'm not talking about that happy ending. And but I thought, you got to tie it all up in a bow, and the only people who are trusted are people who are in happy relationships. And the truth is, I date. I've been in relationships, but I'm not settling this time around. And it gets harder as you get older, to be honest. I'm 68. It's not like when I was 48. I'm looking for somebody who adds value to my life, and I add value to his. And a lot of the people I meet just haven't done work on themselves. They are really stuck, very victim-y, boring. I'm a pretty active. I'm still reinventing myself every day, and I'm putting myself out there in many ways, both meeting people in real life and meeting them online. And I'm open in so many ways to how I'm going to meet them, to who I'm going to meet. But it's not always a simple process, and I'm okay with it. But I am actively doing all the things I talk to people about doing.
And I think that's great that you are. I think it makes a lot of sense that you're going through, you have your professional knowledge, but you're also walking the walk. I'm also curious, what do you think about, and do you have any tips for our listeners on online dating? What's the latest on all that? Because I hear a lot of like frustration.
It has become even more frustrating than it was when I started after my divorce. So about 14 years ago, I don't think there were really apps back then. There were just dating sites. And I had this idea I was going to take out a profile and then I was going to have like a million men contact me and then it would be so overwhelming. Just like I thought I would start a website and a blog and I'd have 1,000 comments and I'd have to be online all day dealing with that. So none of that it happens. You have to have a really thick skin, I think, number one. But there are skills involved, and I teach a course called Find Love Online After 40.
Oh, I love
And
that.
it's actually starting again October 30th. It's a 4-week class. We start with what are your fears? What's getting in the way of dating in general? And then I help them write a profile that's going to work. What people write, I mean, I have seen the worst online dating profiles where people will say, I am petite and pretty. Like, first of all, let people use their eyes to decide if you're pretty. That's not what you put in your profile. You put in the things that make you unique, the qualities you're looking for in a partner, who you are and what you want. And I've seen profiles where it's all about, I'm great. And I do all these wonderful things for people. I give massages. I make good chicken soup. And I remember this one woman, and she was like, everything was all about giving and doing. And I said, what kind of men have you been attracting? And they were all takers. Duh. So I said, you haven't written one word about what your requirements are, what you need in a partner. And so we need both. We need to know how to message effectively. We need to know how to get off of text and onto a phone call, onto a date. We need to know how to open up our preferences so we're not just dating people in a 5-mile radius and we're open to people who are shorter than we think we need and maybe a different race than you considered. When you really boil it down to what are the must-haves and deal breakers, then everything else opens up. And knowing how to make that list. So I do that in the course also and tons of other great information.
I would need that course because I've been, the person that's been in like a 24-year marriage. And I can't even imagine dating. Like that is so terrifying to me. And I'm such an introvert that I think Colette would have to like drag me somewhere and be like,
And
you're
I
gonna talk,
would.
you're gonna
I
be talking
would.
to people. Like
I
that's
would
what you're gonna do.
woman the crap out of you. Don't worry.
I know. That actually would be like semi-fun just to like watch
It
the
would
process
be.
unfold. But here's the thing, one thing that Colette and I talk a lot about, or what we see, is that as women get older, a lot of them, very many of them definitely want a good partner who's additive to their life. But a lot of women are really very comfortable on their own with their groups of friends, living their best life. Are you seeing that trend that a lot of women get to a place that it's like if a partner isn't additive, they're really not particularly interested?
Yes, I see a lot of women like that. I fall into that category.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
You have to just look at the fine line between, am I doing this because I'm afraid there aren't any people, or I haven't dated in so long that I don't want to put myself back out there. I don't want to get hurt. So I will get a dog and get lots of friends and have my pickleball and whatever else people do at this stage in life, which I've never done. As long as you're not doing it because you're afraid,
Yeah.
then, and you're doing it from a place of love and choice, that's great. I think what I worry about is the people who are petrified to date or they've gotten hurt so many times, they're like, yeah, I'm fine.
They
And
foreclose on the process. Yeah.
and they may not know what it would be like to be in a healthy partnership because very few people have been. And so if you've had a really rough relationship history, then why would you want to be in a relationship? You can't even picture a partnership that would be healthy and nourishing and wonderful and add value to your life. So I think people just need to look at that and just see where their choice is coming from.
And I imagine you also see a lot of people who are fearful because it is so scary to put your heart out there. And by this stage of life, most of us have been hurt, at least if we're dating again, right? And that relational pain is so deep. It's so hard. It's so easy for married friends to say, "Oh, you got to get back out there." And they don't know what it feels like to be in those shoes. Are there particular obstacles that you see come up that people really need to overcome? And I imagine you help them work on in terms of finding lasting love.
Absolutely. So I think we'll start with mindset. If you don't have a growth mindset and you have a really fixed mindset about this is what happened, this will happen again, it's just the way it is, my parents were messed up, so I'm messed up, and yada, yada, yada. That stops you cold from moving forward. So mindset is number one. Like really look at where those beliefs came from, where your limiting ideas, thoughts, beliefs, actions begin, and work on that. The other thing is look at whatever choices you've made, look at the patterns that you have, and try to find the commonalities. So we always connect the dots. I look at people's relationship history and the fact that they've ignored red flags over and over and over again, but they're all the same red flags. Like they showed up early on, but we pushed them down, hoped that somehow they would change. It's a lot of that wishful thinking, fantasy, love story that we create. So, really get honest with yourself, know yourself, and see what you have decided is the perfect partner for you, the type, which is usually wrong for you. The distance issue, like we have one couple in the book who met when she was in Florida and he was in Uruguay. And they met over Zoom, 100 hours of talking on Zoom until he came back to Florida where his second home was. They were like snowbirds and he had the second home. And yeah, it was a big risk, but they got to know each other really well because they were both open.
So what would you tell somebody to say? Like, what's the casual way you coach people, women, to ask a man out or ask another woman out?
So let's say you meet somebody in the gym. You have a crush on somebody, but you don't really know anything about them. You could ask them to help you learn how to use a piece of equipment. You could say, hey, I'm going out for coffee after I need to get caffeinated up. Would you like to join me? If it's somebody like one of my clients met a guy in a park and they exchanged numbers and it was a very casual, non-romantic kind of connection, but she would like to go on a date with him. So I said you could send him a text that says something like, I just discovered a new really cool coffee shop. Would you like to join me on Saturday for a cup of coffee? It's low risk, it's not like, please marry me. I don't think about you.
As you're saying that, I'm already like a little blended with my old tropes of like what men should do and what women should do. And that I've been coached in my own brain that like men are the pursuers and you let men pursue. I'm sure you hear that. And the women, I think we even have like a big nugget of like pick me energy. Like, do you like me? Like, am I wanted? Like, that's so much of what shows up in dating. Like, am I enough? That's what's on the line. But as we get older, are we allowed to be a lot more irreverent about this? Do these things have to like fall away?
We're allowed to. I encourage people to be. I think we have to really look at so many. That's one of the limiting beliefs, in my opinion, that men are the pursuers. I mean, most men love when a woman asks them out. And I encourage my female clients to make the first move everywhere. Online dating. Why be passive in your dating life when you're not passive everywhere else?
I love it.
It's so true, though. And it's a lot of women push back. And then there are the women who do too much, who are like, I'm paying for you, and then they get mad at the man for not offering. I mean, we're still living in this kind of in-between period where we had the Me Too movement, so men are afraid to make first moves, but then women don't like it because they want a man to take them and show them that they really care. And I've had men ask permission. I had a man ask if he could pay. Is it okay if I pay? And I'm like, wow, I've never had a man ask me that. I mean,
Wow.
just
And
so
yes,
that's
it
what
is.
we're living.
Payment.
I'm like, yeah, I love to be treated. I mean, I think we have to really look at, like, do I really feel this way? Or is this just an old belief that society put on me for my whole life?
Yeah, and we're afraid of rejection because we're human. But once you do it and you experience some, you realize it isn't going to kill you.
People are looking for that easy thing let me follow the rules. So if this didn't work for me in the past and now I'm going to act hard to get, men are going to be more
Chase you.
interested in me. And it's not true at all. And it's really ruined a lot of people's dating life because it's so manipulative. And it does encourage people to have a lot more anxiety, to have that avoidant, anxious dance because everybody's always pushing and pulling and nobody's being true to themselves. So I'm all about authenticity and bring your best self. Don't dump your entire life out because that's your true self. Learn to have a filter, learn how to present your life in a way that is skilled, but don't fake who you are.
I love that.
Yeah.
Authenticity is the key.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the more you work on yourself and the more securely attached you become, the more you're turned off by these stupid games. And, where that person who has a narcissistic tendencies, who reminds you of your father or your mother, it doesn't work anymore. It's like all of a sudden you realize, okay, maybe they're still attractive to me, but I'm not attracted to them in the same way that I used to be. And I will not get involved in a relationship with someone like this anymore because you know better.
So, okay, so just imagine, just for our listener, like one of our listeners say they're out of a marriage, long-term marriage, and they're getting ready to date. What are some of, like, in your mind, the prerequisite skills that a person may need to take the time to really develop before they're ready to be out there dating?
I would say after you develop the knowledge of your past history, patterns, your attachment style, but really knowing all those parts of you, the next step to me is knowing your values and knowing how you operate. I give my clients something I call an operating manual, and I have them fill it out for themselves so that they can really take a deeper look into how they function on a few key categories that will come up in the dating world. So the first one is your day-to-day. Are you a morning person? Are you a night person? What kind of food do you eat? Just the kind of practical. And then are you an introvert, extrovert? Those are things that are important to know and also to talk about when you're dating, because I had clients who were very introverted, needed a lot of downtime when they were on vacation with a partner, but didn't claim it because they felt it was too needy. So owning, hey, I'm going to need a couple of hours of downtime when we're away. What do you need? Having those conversations. So the next part is your values, right? What are your values? What is really core to who you are that you may have given up in other relationships that you're not going to give up in relationships in the future? And so you protect those values with boundaries, with communication skills. And so I teach all of those. And to bring stuff up when something is hurtful, to bring it up right away, to get curious. Curiosity is like my magic word.
Yes.
People jump to conclusion about everything all the time. That must mean this, and this person did this, and that's why this happened. And we don't know. And so I encourage all of our listeners who are dating to ask questions.
I love the part about knowing your operating system and being willing to claim it. I think everybody should do that inventory and be able to communicate it.
Yeah, own it. Don't prioritize somebody else's needs over your own because it will hurt you every single time. And that goes for people who are raising young children who never take time for themselves. It goes for people who, don't exercise every day or don't eat healthy. I had a client who meditated every morning, but when she was in a relationship, she gave it up and started feeling horrible. And I said, you need to talk to the man you're dating and tell him that you're going to need a certain amount of time in the morning to meditate. That's it. I respect people who know themselves. I love when somebody says, I'm going to need to take a break during the day because I'm overwhelmed. Please do that instead of taking it out on me.
Yes, exactly. And it's mature, it's self-loving, and it also lets a partner know who you are and where your boundaries are. And it's so important because that's going to have to continue throughout the relationship.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So that said, Sandy, what are some of the secrets to making love last from your perspective?
Well, each chapter in my book has love lessons. I asked all of the couples to share what makes their relationship work. I summarize all of them at the end of the book and put them in categories of the first category was self-improvement and reflection. You really have to take the time to know yourself, like we've been talking about, become a higher version of yourself so that you're out there dating with more emotional maturity, with a lot of self-knowledge, and just look at those habits that have formed and question them. The second category was attitude and perspective. And so being positive and hopeful, I think a lot of people just give up hope. And they also rush in. They rush a relationship. And so that's really important not to rush, because when you rush, you try to hurry things along. It usually crashes and burns. Also, don't judge somebody after a first date. I think those first date sparks are such a terrible thing that we've been taught that we're going to feel it and we're going to know it, and our type is the right person. And all of these people dated outside of their type pretty much. So be open to those surprises. Get some relationship skills. Those are really important. And know who's compatible. Don't just look for chemistry. So many people focus so much on chemistry that they forget about compatibility. And chemistry is fleeting. Compatibility is what builds chemistry and makes it continue to flourish and grow.
So your message to like a woman who's like, I dated that, like I went on a date with him, and like my mother always says, I can't get horizontal with that man. That's her thing. I can't get horizontal with him. I mean, do you encourage people to go on a couple more dates and just remain open, or like where do you, use your intuition around chemistry?
Yeah, so if you can't imagine ever kissing or getting horizontal with somebody ever, like if you're turned off completely, don't go on another date.
Okay.
There are reasons for that too. Conversation is stilted. It's not in flow. The person was on their phone during the date, like whatever. It's just not going to work for you. But if the person has some of your must-haves, no apparent deal breakers, there's some attraction. You could imagine maybe kissing this person, maybe one day. Maybe it's a 5 out of 10. Give them another chance.
Okay.
This wedding that I officiated, she absolutely would never have gone on a second date. She was like, I'm not attracted to him, but she was never attracted to anyone. And so the second date, she was like, he was asking her, he tried to hold her hand and she pulled it away. And then he said, are you even looking for a relationship? And she said, yeah. What's wrong with this guy? Why is he talking to me about relationships? I just met him. He's pushy. He's too, And so her mother said, talk to him. Tell him to slow down. Tell him you need more time. So there was a connection. He saw the potential in her, which he was the most patient, incredible man, because she was giving him every sign that she was going to run away. But I do think that if there's some connection, give it a chance. Don't give it 20 dates. Give it 2 or 3 and see if connection grows, because kindness is really sexy. Somebody who shows up is sexy. People who follow through and are consistent and start to build trust. People who listen well and don't just take the whole conversation and make it about themselves. I mean, and if you're having fun and enjoying it, just keep going and see what happens.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did with my husband. In that, when he asked for my number, we had spent this evening talking for hours and hours and hours, but he was not my type at all. In terms of the kind of guy I was historically would go for. I thought he was a nice looking man, but he wasn't somebody that I would have automatically dated when I was younger, certainly. And I was used to men really kind of coming on strong and it having a big chemistry, and also it being very clear that a man was interested in me sexually. So I didn't get any of that from my husband. And in fact, to the point where I thought, does he just like want a therapist or like a divorce buddy? Or, I didn't even know if he was interested in me because there was none of that kind of flirtatiousness. And when he asked for my number, I really thought he just wanted a friend. And what I later found out was that he thought I would never be interested in him and that, he didn't really have a shot with me, but that maybe we could be friends. But he summoned the courage up to like ask me out. And over time, the very qualities you're pointing to, that he showed himself to be reliable and trustworthy and, listened and was very accepting. Those things, especially as we get older and we get healthier, those things are very attractive.
Yeah, and I love that story because you gave him a chance, he gave you a chance, and it didn't happen with the giant fireworks and sparks.
No.
And I like the slow build. I think that it's much more trustworthy. And I think that, again, there was a reason you kept coming back for more.
Right.
I had a relationship like that where he was really slow to make a move. And I'm like, hey, I'm here. I'm interested. And, once I talked to him about I wanted to be exclusive with him, because that was the first time I ever did that too, he was like, I'm all in. And he had to cancel a date that he had. I didn't even know he was dating other people, but you have to assume people are dating others until you have that conversation with them. And so women can have that conversation as well as men. Like be bold, make moves.
In fact, that is what I did with my husband. I finally was the one, because every time I hung out with him, you're right, there was a reason I was coming back, and I started to like him more and more. And I had to really be the one to like make the first move.
Good for you.
He was too freaked out. Yeah.
I love it.
So I love the idea of just giving everyone permission to go with your gut, be authentic. You really can't lose if you're doing that. You may get disappointed, you may get hurt, and you'll be able to handle it. And it will give you more confidence as you handle it. And everything leads you toward the person that is going to work. All the little missteps along the way or disappointments, they're all grist for the mill.
Yeah. And learn from them. Like really take them in and learn from them, because they will lead you there if you take it in and say, okay, that didn't work that time, and I'm going to course correct. And
Right.
I remember when I first started dating, I would totally fall for potential. Like every man, oh my God, I'd be talking to them on the phone. Oh, they were like, that's my person. And then I meet in person and go, oh my, what was I thinking? Because there was zero chemistry, and I had built a fantasy in my head. And we do this so often. We want it to work so badly that we're just building something, this fake something in our heads. And it's that those highs and lows can kill you. And so don't do that. Like learn from that and learn what you need to be at the pace that works for you. I think we all have to really check in with ourselves.
It's such good advice. Oh my
That
gosh,
is good
Sandy,
advice.
thank you. And before we let you go, please tell our listeners how they can connect with you and find your books and your podcasts and all that good stuff.
Well, this has just been a fantastic conversation. Thank you. You can find me at lastfirstdate.com, and I have a tab that says courses and books, and it's all my courses, both live and DIY, and at the bottom of that page are links to all my books. I have tons of programs, lots of blog posts, over 1,000. I have a YouTube channel, Instagram. Just connect. Let's connect.
Sandy, thank you again. This has been wonderful, and
Yes.
I can't wait to connect further. I'm so glad to have met you. And for our listeners, thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Insights from the Couch. Don't forget to share it with your friends who may benefit from this content, and leave us a review, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.